When we think of African American cooking today, we picture fried chicken, mac and cheese, or collard greens on Sunday tables. But hidden behind those famous staples is an older, deeper food story. One built on survival, creativity, and tradition. For generations, Black families in the South, the Caribbean, and across America made magic out of scraps, forage greens, field peas, and sorghum syrup. These weren't just meals. They were lifelines, flavored with resilience and memory. Many of those dishes, once cooked in cast-iron skillets or stirred in tin pots, have quietly disappeared from our kitchens. Some sound unusual, others comforting. But each one connects us to a history that deserves remembering. Today, we're digging into 30 lost African American recipes your grandparents or great-grandparents probably knew. Recipes that tell stories of hardship, resourcefulness, and above all, flavor. 1. Hoecakes. Before non-stick pans and box mixes, African American families made hoecakes, cornmeal griddle cakes, with a history stretching back to the fields. Enslaved people and poor farmers alike would mix cornmeal, salt, and water into a simple batter, then cook it on the flat side of a hoe blade set over the fire. That's where the name came from. Hoecakes were crisp at the edges, soft in the middle, and filling enough to fuel long days of labor. Sometimes they were eaten plain, other times they were dipped in molasses, sorghum, or even pot liquor, the rich broth left from simmered greens. In later years, as kitchens became more formal, hoecakes shifted to skillets, but the spirit stayed the same, humble, hearty, and born of resourcefulness. Today, you'll rarely see them on restaurant menus, but to many grandparents, a good hoecake tasted like home. 2. Hoppin' John. On New Year's Day in the South, one pot told the story of hope. Hoppin' John. Black-eyed peas, simmered with rice and a hunk of salt pork or smoked ham hock weren't just dinner. They were a ritual. Each piece symbolized coins. Each bowl promised prosperity. The dish traces back to West Africa, where beans and rice were staples, and it carried forward through slavery, emancipation, and the Great Migration. Families believed eating Hoppin' John at the year's start could shape their fortune. Even today, some elders won't let January 1st pass without it. But outside tradition, Hoppin' John has quietly faded from everyday tables, replaced by quicker meals. Back then, though it was more than food, it was a prayer in a pot. 3. Chitlins. Chitlins weren't for the faint of heart. Made from pig intestines, they demanded hours of cleaning and slow simmering just to be edible. For enslaved people, chitlins were survival, the parts the plantation owner didn't want. But in Black kitchens, they became delicacies, seasoned with onions, garlic, and hot sauce, transforming scraps into something soulful. Holiday gatherings and church socials often revolved around a chitlin pot bubbling on the stove. The smell was strong, the taste bold, and the ritual unforgettable. Some loved them, some swore them off, but for many grandparents, chitlins weren't just food. They were a reminder of endurance and family ties. Today, they're rare on the menu, but still hold a place in Black culinary memory. 4. Neck bone stew. If you grew up in the South, you might remember the sound of pork neck bones hitting a pot. Tough, bony, and overlooked, neck bones had just enough meat to flavor an entire stew. Cooks would simmer them with onions, potatoes, and sometimes greens until the meat fell off the bone, creating a rich, comforting dish that stretched a few scraps into a meal for a whole family. Neck bone stew wasn't about waste, it was about wisdom. Grandparents knew how to coax flavor from what others discarded. A plate of neck bones with cornbread on the side could turn a poor man's supper into a feast. 5. Cowpeas and rice. Long before red beans and rice became famous, there was cowpeas and rice, a dish rooted in West African foodways. Cowpeas, hardy legumes that thrive in poor soil, traveled with enslaved Africans across the Atlantic and became a southern staple. Simmered with smoked meat or salt pork, they produced a savory broth that soaked into rice, turning simple grains into a sustaining, protein-rich meal. Generations of African American families relied on cowpeas not just for nourishment, but for connection to land, to ancestry, to resilience. Today, cowpeas are almost forgotten outside seed catalogs and heritage farms, but for many grandparents, a bowl of cowpeas and rice was the taste of history itself. Number 6. Okra stew. Slimy to some, sacred to others, okra was a vegetable carried from West Africa that took root in southern soil. In black kitchens, it wasn't just a side dish. It was the base of hearty stews. Sliced okra thickened pots of tomatoes, onions, and smoked meat into a rich, earthy meal that could feed a family with little more than a handful of ingredients. Some versions resembled gumbo, others were simpler, cooked slow over the fire. Okra stew wasn't about luxury, it was about memory. For grandparents who grew it in backyard gardens, a steaming bowl connected them to an older world, where seeds carried culture across oceans. Number 7. Ash cakes. Imagine cornmeal dough packed into a patty, buried in hot ashes, then brushed clean and eaten hot. That was an ash cake, one of the oldest African American bread traditions. Born from necessity, when ovens weren't available, ash cakes were survival food. Simple, smoky, and filling, they could be sweetened with molasses or eaten plain alongside greens or beans. Grandparents remembered them not as fancy fare, but as proof that you could make something out of nothing. The ashes gave them flavor, a taste of fire and grit. Number 8. Hog head cheese. Despite the name, this wasn't cheese at all. Hog head cheese was a tranche made from boiling a pig's head until the meat and natural gelatin came together into a sliceable loaf. Spiced with vinegar, onions, and peppers, it was chilled and eaten cold with crackers or cornbread. In rural black communities, nothing went to waste, not even the head. Though the process was long, the payoff was a delicacy that turned scraps into pride. For grandparents, hog head cheese was a mark of skill in the kitchen, proof that frugality could taste like luxury. Number 9. Molasses taffy pulls. Long before store-bought candy, kids gathered for molasses taffy pulls. Molasses was boiled down, cooled just enough to handle, and then stretched and folded by hand until shiny. It wasn't just a sweet treat, it was entertainment, a social event where families and neighbors came together. Sticky fingers, laughter, and strings of candy marked the memory. Many grandparents could recall the smell of molasses bubbling on the stove and the joy of stretching sugar into something fun. Number 10. Sorrel drink. Bright red and tart, sorrel drink was a holiday tradition carried from the Caribbean into African American kitchens. Made from dried hibiscus flowers steeped with spices, ginger, and sugar, it was both refreshing and medicinal. Some added rum, others kept it family-friendly, but either way, it carried the taste of heritage. Sorrel wasn't just a drink, it was a toast to ancestors, poured into glasses during Christmas and New Year celebrations. For grandparents with Caribbean roots, no holiday table felt complete without it. Number 11. Collard green pot liquor. After collard greens simmered for hours with ham hocks or turkey necks, the leftover broth at the bottom of the pot was liquid gold. Called pot liquor, it held the nutrients and flavor of the greens, smoky meat, and spices. Nothing was wasted. Families dipped cornbread straight into it, soaking up every drop. Some say pot liquor was as important as the greens themselves, a tonic for strength and healing. Grandparents often sipped it for mugs, remembering lean times when pot liquor was the meal. Number 12. Peanut soup. Peanuts, brought from Africa, became a staple in southern black cooking. Peanut soup was creamy, nutty, and filling, often blended with onions, broth, and a touch of spice. In Virginia and the Carolinas, it was once a common starter at family tables, balancing richness with comfort. Though it's rarely seen today, this humble soup reminded grandparents of roots that stretched far beyond America's shores. Number 13. Sweet potato biscuits. Fluffy, golden, and lightly sweet, sweet potato biscuits were a Sunday treat. Mashed sweet potatoes gave them color and natural sweetness, while lard or butter made them tender. Served warm with cane syrup or fried chicken, they turned simple meals into celebrations. Many grandparents baked them by hand, passing down recipes that never needed measuring cups, just memory and feel. Number 14. Persimmon pudding. Wild persimmons grew across the South, and black families knew how to turn them into dessert. Once ripened, their sweet pulp was mixed with sugar, eggs, and flour, then baked into a dense, rich pudding. Served at holidays or family gatherings, persimmon pudding tasted like fall, earthy, caramel-like, and comforting. Grandparents often remembered gathering persimmons from the trees themselves, proof that dessert could come straight from the land. Number 15. Brunswick stew. This hearty dish had many versions, but in black communities, it was often a mix of whatever was on hand. Leftover chicken, rabbit, or squirrel simmered with tomatoes, corn, and lima beans. Brunswick stew was survival cooking, stretching scraps into a flavorful, filling pot that fed many. Grandparents recalled it as a community meal, often made outdoors in giant kettles during gatherings. No recipe was ever exact. It was about making do and making it delicious. Number 16. Red bean pie. Long before canned pie fillings, African American families made use of what they had, even beans. Red bean pie was sweetened with sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg until it resembled pumpkin or sweet potato pie. It was resourceful cooking at its finest, turning humble beans into dessert. For grandparents, this pie wasn't just unusual. It was a reminder that creativity in the kitchen could sweeten the hardest of times. Number 17. Fish head stew. When fishermen sold their best catches, heads and bones were often left behind. Black families transformed those cast-offs into fish head stew, simmering them with onions, peppers, and tomatoes until the broth was rich with flavor. Tender scraps of meat fell from the head, creating a dish that wasted nothing. Grandparents often remembered it as a poor man's meal that tasted like royalty. Number 18. Sorghum syrup on biscuits. Sorghum cane grew in southern fields, and its syrup became a staple sweetener before refined sugar was common. Poured over hot biscuits or cornbread, it was earthy, thick, and deeply sweet. Many grandparents recalled visiting sorghum mills each fall, where the juice was boiled into syrup. A drizzle of sorghum wasn't just breakfast, it was tradition bottled in amber. Number 19. Fried catfish with cornmeal crust. Caught in rivers and ponds, catfish fed countless black families. Coated in seasoned cornmeal and fried golden in hot grease, it was a dish that blended sustenance with celebration. Fish fries became community events, laughter, music, and plenty of crispy fillets shared on newspaper-lined tables. Grandparents knew fried catfish as both everyday food and a feast worth gathering for. Number 20. Souse pickled meat. Souse was a tangy, chilled dish made by pickling leftover pork parts, feet, ears, or even trimmings in vinegar and spices. It was eaten cold, often with crackers or bread, and packed a punch of flavor. Though not glamorous, souse was a way to preserve meat without refrigeration. For grandparents, a jar of souse in the icebox meant nothing went to waste, and flavor was always close at hand. Number 21. Liver and onions. Strong in flavor and packed with iron, liver and onions was once a regular dinner table meal. Thinly sliced beef or pork liver was pan-fried with onions until tender, then served with gravy and rice. It wasn't glamorous, but it was nourishing, exactly what working families needed. Many grandparents remembered liver night as a test of taste buds. Some loved it, some hated it, but no one forgot it. Number 22. Cracklin' bread. Cornbread got an upgrade when cooks added pork cracklings, crispy bits of rendered fat. The result was rich, savory bread that turned simple cornmeal into something indulgent. Served hot from a skillet, it carried the smoky flavor of the hog straight into every bite. Grandparents often spoke of cracklin' bread as comfort food, born from thrift, but celebrated for taste. Number 23. Wild green salad. Before grocery stores, families foraged for what the land offered: pokeweed, dandelion, mustard, and turnip greens. Mixed together, they became wild green salad, sometimes eaten raw, other times wilted with hot bacon grease poured on top. It was earthy, bitter, and bracing, but full of vitamins when nothing else was available. Grandparents remembered foraging trips as both necessity and tradition, passing down knowledge of which greens healed and which to avoid. Number 24. Vinegar pie. When lemons were scarce, cooks turned to vinegar. A splash of it mimicked the tartness of citrus, creating vinegar pie, a custard-like dessert flavored with sugar, butter, and spice. It was Depression-era ingenuity, stretching pantry staples into something sweet. For grandparents, vinegar pie proved that even in lean times, dessert didn't have to disappear. Number 25. Rabbit stew. Hunting wasn't just sport, it was survival. Rabbit stew was a common dish, with game simmered in onions, carrots, and potatoes until tender. Sometimes thickened with flour, sometimes left brothy. It was filling and flavorful. For grandparents, rabbit wasn't exotic. It was simply dinner, caught in fields or traps and cooked with care. Number 26. Blackstrap molasses tea. When coffee was too expensive, families turned to molasses stirred into hot water for a makeshift tea. Sweet, dark, and slightly bitter, it offered warmth and energy. Some added milk, others drank it straight. For grandparents, it wasn't fancy. It was survival in a cup, proof that comfort could come from the simplest of ingredients. Number 27. Corn pone. More rustic than cornbread. Corn pone was made without milk or eggs, just cornmeal, salt, water, and fat. Baked in a skillet or on open hearths, it was dense, hearty, and filling. Corn pone carried echoes of Native American cooking, adapted into African American kitchens as a daily bread. Grandparents remembered it as the workhorse of the table, plain, but always dependable. Number 28. Pig's feet. Slow simmered until tender, pig's feet were seasoned with vinegar, pepper, and spices, then eaten with rice or bread. They were messy to eat, but full of flavor, prized for their gelatin-rich broth. For grandparents, pig's feet symbolized thrift and tradition, proof that no part of the hog was wasted. What others threw away, they turned into comfort food. Number 29. Slab pie. Unlike the delicate pies of today, slab pies were baked in large sheet pans to feed big families. Filled with apples, berries, or even sweet potatoes, they stretched ingredients as far as possible. Sliced into squares instead of wedges, slab pies were practical, portable, and perfect for gatherings. Grandparents remembered them as the dessert that always showed up at church socials and family reunions. Number 30. Hominy grits. Made from dried corn soaked in lye, hominy grits were a breakfast staple long before instant packets. Cooked slow with water or milk, they were creamy and filling, often topped with butter, gravy, or cheese. Grits carried deep ties to both Native American and African food traditions, becoming a backbone of Southern Black kitchens. For grandparents, a hot bowl of hominy grits was more than food. It was fuel for the day ahead.